pleasure is mine. I freaking love talking books. I love Cliff. He's one of these people that just gets it and has for so long. And I tried years ago to do something that was very similar to Talking Book, and it was an abject failure. And it is so amazing that Cliff and his amazing team of ethnographers and technologists and social scientists have figured out what my custom hardware was missing, and then have been able to stay with this, because this is a very fickle field. So many technologists come into this and like, I'm done, making money for shareholders. I want to go change the world. And they go into it, and like 3 years later, they're just like, I'm beaten. I'm totally beaten. Like, poverty's really hard. It's complex. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't like malaria. I don't like travel. I don't like any, and they leave. And so there's just not a great retention. Cliff, has been a stalwart. He's been in there. He's taken his hits. And I can't talk enough. I always try to talk about Talking Book when I go to places, because every development program I've ever seen or worked with would benefit so much from this program. And it's such a no-brainer to me, and I don't understand why the large development agencies, pockets of them get this. People really see it and they believe. But we need a really big sea change, and I'm going to talk a lot about why I think Talking Book is so amazing, why Amplio as a network is, it's more than an organization, it really is a vision that gets it. So thank you, Cliff, for letting me come and talk, because it's such a privilege and a pleasure. I really, we have in this field, it was called ICT for development. Now we're calling it digital development. Long enough anything changes its name, right? Or its logo or something. But this field, this sector of development called digital development, our failure rate conservatively has been put at by the World Bank 80%. That's not a great, if you were in any other industry, that would not actually be a great failure rate. Maybe the restaurant industry, but even that's probably better. But it's amazing to me that you have all of these wonderful brains that want to do good stuff, and we keep just failing the people we want to serve for so many obvious reasons, and I'll talk with you about those. But for me, it comes down to the fact that we're not actually looking at women's specific information and development needs. And when you talk about the most vulnerable people in the world, it's no surprise that women are the largest chunk of that most vulnerable population. They're the ones that have the least access to, the least agency to do things in their community, the least access to information. They're the highest numbers of illiterates, the lowest numbers of landowners, etc. And yet, we've got 60 years of qualitative and quantitative data that say that women are absolutely the key to sustainable community development. And so, so you would think that women plus technology would be this great force multiplier, and we would be over poverty by now. We'd have hit all those UN SDG goals. But the fact remains that so many digital development programs just don't even, they're so tech-centric. And this is my big complaint, and I come from the tech industry, right? So I feel like I can say that with some sort of, authority and damnation, where, hey, it's technology, it's agnostic, it's just a tool, you just use it, men use it, women use it, cats use it. No, but we'll talk about that more. The biggest critique that I got when I was doing my own hardware platform that wasn't a talking book, and probably it's good that it failed, was people kept saying, just make it a cell phone, just make it a cell phone. And I'm sure Cliff has also heard that a few times, sure. Well, let me tell you that every woman in the world who can and is able to have a cell phone has one. This is about, and I'll qualify that, the asterisk, 1 billion plus women who have no cell phones at all. Which is funny, because at USAID, I've had conversations even last week with both the Kenyan mission director and the Indian mission director, who have looked me in the face and said, I don't know why you're even talking. We have no gender digital divide in our country. All right, that's adorable. I don't know what country, what area do you live in? And I said, well, what about the hundreds, the thousands of Indian villages in 3 northern states that have banned women's cell phone use outright? And the mission director said something to me like, well, that's not the real India. We're talking about all the women that go to college, they have phones. I'm well, I'm not sure that's necessary. There's a lot of real Indias out there. And we're talking, it's India, the numbers are huge and staggering. So yes, there is a big gender digital divide. And that's what I've been focused on really for the last 20-some years, both when I was at Microsoft Research, on domestic pipeline issues and women in technology, and then looking more at what the international kind of global barriers were, and they're very, very different. I have my gloom and doom slide just to set the context here. So I've actually worked on several projects, one lately in southwest Morocco in a Berber community, where we've seen a lot of women after a mobile phone project to help manage natural resources, in this case argan oil, which is of course like the new black, right? There's going to be a new oil every decade, and this is argan oil's decade. But these women on these argan oil collectives were given a bunch of cell phones by a large development agency that is not the one I currently work for, and several of them were killed for using their phones because they would get spam messages, they would get a hang-up call, they would get that kind of stuff. Their family, their husbands, etc., would look through the phone at the end of the day and say, "What is this number?" And the woman would say, "I don't know, I didn't answer it." And it's like, well, it's not a known number, Ergo, it could be from a man. Ergo, you must be having an affair. I mean, and this is the kind of things that happen all over the world. So it's not just that women don't have phones that they can, take Snapchat pictures of. It's the fact that this gets to be a very deadly situation in development. And yes, that is not the standard in a lot of communities, but more so what I'm seeing right now is a backlash against technology as the world becomes a little more populist, a little scarier. When you batten down the hatches socially, you have more restrictive social norms, more restrictive cultural barriers when things feel out of control. And this is a pretty out of control time, from climate change to migration to many things. I live in DC, so I'm acutely aware of some of these many things. But I mean, I'm just watching there be a backlash with women in technology, which is sad after how much work has gone into this space. But if the Wall Street Journal says there is, it's not just the Revi Sterling show saying so. But let me tell you, I mean, this gender-digital divide has actually been growing in the last few years, which seems anathema because so many more technologies, the price point has dropped. You can get these cheap phones. What's the new iOS? For smartphones that brings the phone price down to maybe $12, $15, $20. More and more technology is proliferating around the world. There's more incubators. I mean, there's over 60 tech incubators, not as nice as this, probably not as good as food, but some of them are actually really awesome. There's over 60 on the African subcontinent alone. I mean, that's very interesting. There's a lot of stuff happening with technology, and yet the International Telecommunications Union, the UNITU, has been actually tracking this growth of the gender-digital divide. Because the more technologies that come in faster and bigger and better and cheaper actually just widens this gap, because where do women start? Where are the on-ramps if it keeps moving and moving? It's like you don't catch up. You have a country like Chad that hasn't had internet for a year. There's just no internet backbone going in. Like, how do you catch up from that? What if you had no news for, if we had no news for a year, it would probably be fabulous. That said. But again, I mean, I go back to this idea that, both, if you could combine more effectively women's talents and drive and technology, we really could do some amazing things. And I'm going to get around to the fact that obviously talking book is the way to do that, But, for the computer scientists in the room, perhaps some of you are aware of Conway's Law. This came out of, Conway was this is from 1967. And Conway was the first to say, technology is not an agnostic neutral tool. It is completely imbued with the values of the person that created it. So as we're writing software, this starts reflecting in the kinds of things that actually, if I'm designing it thinking everybody is like me, and they're not, then there's going to be a design reality gap. It falls into the hands of the powerful. It just becomes a tool that can also, maintain that status quo. Even though we look at that and like, oh, they have cell phones, now they can access this online content. This gap of this billion women, for me, and for what I've been studying for so long and railing about for years, comes down to really these social norms. That these billion women that are not online, it's because somebody doesn't want them to be. The mother-in-law, the husband, the cleric, the employer. People want the status quo. Apparently, for some odd reason, empowered women are scary and uppity. And people in development fail to remember that, because a lot of men are just like, yeah, of course we're all for women's rights and all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, but when I'm working up in northern Nigeria, and I'm working with conservative clerics that are trying to find Quranic examples of why women shouldn't use the internet, you're going up against some serious social norms, some serious religious barriers, that kind of stuff. And that's gonna scare people into behaving exactly the way that those in power want them to. Also, there's just the realities of what's out there in terms of technology. Like I went up to this community network, and for those of you that are a little outside of the parlance, community networks are basically internet service providers that are very, very local. They're built by the community, for the community. They're usually off the major grid. They're in places where most mobile network operators, there's no commercial viability for them to go in and put a tower in and run subscriptions or a backhaul or that kind of stuff. So I'd heard all about this amazing community network in a former IDP, internally displaced people's camp in northern Uganda, where former people were gathered to protect themselves from LRA incursions. And I'd heard about this great community network, and it was serving the community. That was the community network. This computer is 3 by 4 inches. It does, it is connected to the internet via satellite. You're not going to do web development off of that. You're not going to learn Python and Ruby on Rails, but this is actually a huge lifeline for this community, and it is that's their internet center. And, I show that to people, and they're like, oh, I thought it'd be like maybe a few more computers, maybe bigger ones. Like, this is the reality. This is the one that the goats didn't get to. This is the one that didn't have a snake in the, the motor of it. These are the cell phones we're working with. This is why things like why all these smartphone apps that are pervading this digital development culture in agriculture, in WASH, in food security, etc., are just pointless, because you're not going to run on that phone. And that is a friggin' fancy phone, let me tell you. It's not even missing its buttons. Its screen isn't cracked. It even has like a little pop socket thing to it, So, the phones are great where they're appropriate, when they're appropriate. In most of the communities where I work, the phones would probably be taken and sold. I've got 2 projects right now in India where you have to keep a minimum of 35 rupees airtime on your phone no matter what for your number to actually work. And I would say 80% of the women that don't use their cell phones, that is the case because they don't have 35 rupees to have on their phone. That's 50 cents. So we're dealing with these marginalized populations that Cliff is talking about, the very poorest of the poor. These are the women that actually need to know that there is a government social service, program for widows in their community, or that they can join NREGA and get a number of guaranteed paid labor days a year, or that this is when school starts for their kids to bring them back in from the fields, etc. And they can't. They can't keep 50 cents on their phone. So this is why, looking for something like, this is why I love Talking Book, because it's got dignified design. I'm going to talk about that. It's not a phone. It's shareable. So many resources, are not necessarily need to be individualized. A women's collective or a women's savings and loan group, they might have a rake and a plow and a few other things. These are shared resources. This one model of one phone per person is pretty luxurious and a bit anachronistic in a lot of these places, just in terms of what the resources would be. So I want to talk about why I think what effective empowerment looks like and why that leads up to Amplio in so many ways. But what I've seen a lot of is the fact that if you can empower women online, in online communities, and we see this with, when the internet started, right? The great democratizer of the internet, that marginalized groups could come online and have a website about anything, really. And then you could kind of mobilize, and then that would actually have on the ground real activities that, meetup, not for detail, maybe all the money was being raised online, but yeah. So, the idea that you can actually have, I've worked with so many, you're working with community radio stations where the radio station will play a woman's voice, about her experiences or that kind of stuff online, and then the husband would be like, oh my God, my wife is actually kind of smart. That made a lot of sense. I might listen to her now. What's mediated in technology somehow becomes legitimated because the technology was used. There's all this weird psychological stuff, and development really is kind of a fundamentally psychological experiment in a lot of cases. But nothing is going to work unless we're getting down to this grassroots level, this community level of giving information that people need, and much more so getting that feedback back from people. Because it's no fun just to be told all the time what to do. You probably actually have an opinion on this. You may have some knowledge that the aid worker doesn't have, etc. So I think that's one of the reasons why so many of our projects in this space fail, because we just tell, and we never ask. We don't solicit back, so we don't know. That's why they're poor. There's just that paternalistic mentality that we just have sort of automatically. And then the programs that I've been running, working a lot with men. in this space. They have to be the advocates. Nothing happens without men saying it is okay. So finding those positive deviants in the community and really rewarding them. Using things like interactive voice recording. Yes, we are annoyed with IVR when we call United Airlines. But other people, actually, this is a lifeline to people because you don't have to have tech skills. You don't have to be literate. You can call a number that has been posted to you or texted to you on a phone that looks like the one before, or in one of our projects. This is walking her through the number to call to get children's immunization, information on when the clinic is going to come to this very, very rural community. Then we're sitting with her and watching her do this again and again until she realizes she's not going to break the phone. This woman in particular liked to tell me she was too dumb to use the phone. I'm just too dumb. I'm not smart. I can't. You can use this phone. And you see that confidence build when they actually do connect and they get a piece of information, and then they're solicited for feedback. And she's like, someone wants to hear from me? Yes, we want to hear from you. And she says, well, those times aren't convenient for me to vaccinate my kids. Well, then propose I can do that. You can do that. And also creating new social norms for women for technologies. So in a lot of cases, when a technology comes to a community, it goes to the chief, it goes to the men, it might go to the chief's wife, but for the most part, it's not hitting the most marginalized within those communities. I don't see the fact that there are huge fissures within these communities. There's subcaste differences, there's religious differences, there's stuff that goes back, blood feuds, there's just the fact that I don't like you and you don't like me, and we don't know that. That's why it takes that kind of hyper-local approach, to understanding what's going to work in this community and what's not. So in northern Nigeria, there's been this fatwa in these communities I've been working with that basically the conservative clerics have said, actually, it is completely permissible to beat your wife or divorce her if she is on a social network site without your permission. Maybe she's just trying to sell some stuff. Maybe she's just trying to communicate with her family, that's part of a diaspora community somewhere else. So we've been working with these clerics. I've been actually working with NGO, very small, experts within countries and small organizations, to work with these clerics. Say, well, under what condition would you even let women use phones? None. All right, well, okay. Let's say you would let a woman use a phone. If she had to get prayer times for the phone, would that be okay? Yeah. Great. So those are those little openings. It's like that Japanese pottery that gets broken and you fill it with gold. It's like you find that little break and then you just exploit it and you shine so much light through it that it's like, okay, well, what if she needs to know what direction Mecca is? That's fine. Well, what if she wants to do some reading on her own about this? That's fine. Okay, now we're getting someplace. Now we can start playing, a little more push, push, pull, push. And it's really an interesting kind of adaptive system. You're trying to figure out new social norms with women in technology. One of this is actually kind of a success story. This is that tower up in Uganda, that community network. It's all run by women. Normally, if a technology provider came in, a community network here, probably a group of men would get together and they'd put it up and it would be fine, but they probably wouldn't let women use it as much because it's a man's thing. It's technical, it's phones, and we don't need our women to have information, and they become empowered, and that's apparently a terrible thing. In this case, the org that we're working with takes women from different communities all over the world that are off the cellular and electrical grid, brings them together in sort of a barefoot university, solar sisters model way, teaches them how to stand up both an electrical mini microgrid system and an internet service provider. Then they go back to their communities. And so they're the ones bringing in 2 utilities that never even existed. And all of a sudden, that is women's work. I mean, their men are like, I'm not gonna play around with a bunch of women and all this stuff. But they're thrilled they have the internet. So there's just no issue at all of the women leading in these 2 spaces. This kind of gets us back to, to the talking book and why it's really doing real development, because it's working at that hyper-local level. And that's so hard to do because everything in our field is scale, scale, scale. Can that scale? Can that scale? And what I mean by scale is, will it reach millions of people within this year and pull them out of poverty? And that's why so many projects fail, because they say, oh yeah, we'll scale. Well, in order to scale, you do sort of least common, the most common denominator, least customizable program, and you hope that some people use it. It doesn't work. That is just failed development. You have to go deep, you have to go small, you've got to find those champions in country. Then the hut next door literally has to see that your family, that family there is better off because they had that thing that looks like that, and they're doing better than I am, so I want that thing, and then I want that thing. It's like this attraction rather than promotion, metaphor that works, especially with talking books. The other thing is that these things have been around now for a while. We do not have staying power in this field. Like I said, things drop in and things drop out. These things have been around now. There's so many iterations. Cliff has hired such amazing people to do monitoring and evaluation and deep analysis of what works and what doesn't, and changed all this stuff midstream. Like, to me, there are very few examples that I can take to my graduate students and say, these are successful digital development projects. Talking Book, Amplio is always #1 because it follows exactly what matters, and it's also built up so much trust. You go to communities, and the first thing they do is tell you you're not going to come back. They've been dissed by so many development projects. They've been dissed by so many people that have come through and said, I'll be back, I'll be back. They never come back. Because let me tell you, some of these areas that are off the beaten path, sometimes I don't want to go back. And you're like, no, you said you're going to go back. People are surprised. You come for a second time, you come for a third time. You invest for multiple years, you get this trust thing where people are like, oh yeah, we are part of this, and this person listens to us and represents us to our governments, to our ministries, to the World Bank. It's absolutely fabulous. And I want to go back to the form factor. I love this. This is like a device with dignity. So much of our stuff is dumbed down in this space, because it's meant for, really, hand-me-down cell phones or computers that don't really work, and it all looks like a child should use it. And this takes all the best tenets from like HCD and user-centric design and just be like, okay, this makes sense without being insulting. And that is a fine, fine line between being paternalistic and between helpful. And I think that that's just, and this is kind of why I think that, this is my view of why Amplio is so amazing, is they've been there. The data show that this actually works. The understanding that humans need to exchange the information. Understanding that, Cliff, I see him all over the place. He comes to the practitioners conference. He goes to the academic conferences. Like, this man builds bridges because he's going to take those bits and pieces of other people's expertise and feed them back here. I don't know how you do it. I know you've got like a family. I don't have kids. I have a plant, and I can't even handle that. But there's so much leadership. When I was coming out here, I was telling some people, I'm going to go to the Amplio conference. They're like, I love talking books. And these are people that are luminaries in their space of educational technology, in digital financial services, in big data for agriculture, and they were so emphatic. Like, my cool factor went up so high. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to the Amplio thing. Cliff invited me out to talk, and they're just like, Cliff is the real thing. He's the magic special sauce. There are not projects that get at the root like this. This is what we need more of. We need to get behind what really, really, really works. The biggest complaint I get about Talking Book, about stuff I do, it's not cell phone based. Thank goodness it's not cell phone based. The chances are it might actually work. And you've got communities. When I was, working in stuff where I thought they were going to come online. I thought mobile network operators would have covered them by now. I would thought there'd be electricity in some of these places. I just interviewed 8,000 women in Mozambique about their cell phone use and ownership. Of them, I would say 55% did own phones, of 8,000. And of those 8,000, 2 women had smartphones. So that's the reality we're looking at. These phones are not necessarily all that useful because they're a tool that, they don't come preloaded with content. I don't know. I can't say enough, so I'll just shut up. But I love this organization. I think that their ability to transform, if we could just get more organizations like mine on board, like GT, like all the other USAIDs that the bilaterals have, the Canadians, the Swedes, everybody. But, we also got to get people outside of our field. We agree, we know this is good stuff. We also need to, really amplify this to other sectors. The WASH sector, the education sector. Why isn't The Economist running a piece on this? We need something in foreign, affairs. We need people that are looking at the policy level to be like, oh, there is a solution that's right under our noses. So I would say if there's anything that I could ask for is helping get people outside of the development sector, that care about the world, really excited about this. This is all I do, it's all I really care about, and I'd love to talk to you more, and that's why I'm so honored to be here tonight.